going on, people? Welcome to We Are Reading. Thank you for joining us live. Thank you for watching this on the replay. If you're watching the replay, my name is Eli Wananda, as you can see, and I do very frequent. It used to be weekly, but sometimes it's not quite weekly. Live streams where we discuss books, articles, essays, and other things, primarily from African authors, writers, thinkers, going through ideas, concepts, theories, history, cultural investigation, and all these kinds of things, which I think are useful for us as African people around the world as we negotiate this existence of ours as racialized people in this world, trying to work out how we can, the Sankofa model, primarily learn from our ancestors, learn from the things that our great elders have done in the past, such as Baba Amos Wilson, learn from that and see how we can put those ideas and carry on the legacy, take the baton from them in order to, to create a bright and new world for Black people, for African people around the world. So that is We Are Reading in a nutshell. It's been running for a year now, so I'm very proud of that. And I'm grateful for all of you guys who watch the videos, who watch the live streams and all that good stuff. Always a pleasure. Greetings to you, English Gal 234. Hope you're well, my family. Hope you're good over there in the States. Thanks for everyone. Greetings to everyone else who's joining as well on the live. Peace and blessings to you, each and every single one of you. I know some of you guys like to watch without commenting, and that's all good. But shout out to you as well. Shout out to all of you guys as well. Shout out to you, Tito District. Peace and blessings on this good Saturday indeed. RBG, love to you. Always a pleasure. Tito, a loyal and very valued supporter and confidant at times of of We Are Reading and the kind of different works that I'm trying to do on the channel as well. So peace to you. Peace. And then shouting out to another very loyal and very prolific commenter and contributor to our streams, Lao Tzu, and always coming with the grand welcome that you give, which is Grand Rising. Beautiful ebony people, 10th of February 532 of the Ma'afa. The Oba T Shaka show is running over and I'm dual listening today. Oh, sorry. I should check to see what other people are doing on their streams. But yeah, thank you for dueling. Anyway, much appreciated. Shout out to you, MA. What's going on, my brother? Dea in the house. Good. Mbote na yo, yes indeed. Mbote, salama, habari gani, and all that good stuff. Mulembe, alafia, I think the Yoruba say, and all that. So yes, I. Good to have you guys on board. Welcome. It's been a very busy last couple of weeks on my end, so it's good to be back in the hot seat, I must say. Obviously the main thing that I've been up to is launching my website. So let me I should share, just do a little quick share of the site here so you guys can, if you haven't already seen it, you can see it now. So how do I do that? Yeah, click on that should bring it up. Hopefully that's sharing now. Yeah, so there you go. That is the first iteration of my website, or our website. I say my, I mean, I'm running it, but it's, the idea is that it's supposed to be a resource for everybody, particularly for Black people, for African people, parents, teachers, and carers, but for everybody as well, because even, I'll explain in a minute. But as you can see here, this is the website, launched last week, 1st of February 2024. So I'm glad I was able to get it out there in time for Black History Month in the United States, snakes. So this is the site. The basic idea of the site is to be a directory of resources for parents and carers and teachers of primarily Black children, but anyone else can use it as well. So as you see here, it's broken down currently into into two main sections. So you've got the resources for younger children there. You've got the resources for older children there. They're the two main sources. They're the ones that are going to be, they're the sections that are going to be mostly being populated over the first period of weeks and months. And the idea really for the site came about because with two small boys, both under 6, I constantly am scouring in the internet to find resources and things that I think are suitable for us, for them as young Black boys to be watching and for us to be going through. And it just dawned on me, actually, let me just share. There's me, by the way. That's me, and that's my two sons there. I don't put their faces on the internet because that's for them to decide when they want to go live and direct. I'm sure it won't be too long before they're clamoring to join me on my live streams because they're like, "You're doing a live stream, Dada." But so you see here, yeah, these are the categories. And I said in my post recently on YouTube, what I said, these sections of STEM, philosophy and self-mastery, science, politics and economics, and arts and creativity are pretty much based on the categories of African-centered an African-centered curriculum, which I came across in Blueprint for Black Power, which is the book we'll read in a minute. And so I wanted to kind of use that as a framework to organize the content, and I think it should work. It's obviously, it's iterative. I'll keep iterating, but these are the categories. And what I'm finding is that the majority of people, the majority of the early content is around STEM, and most of it will be initially around STEM for younger children, because those are the things that I kind of talk to my young children mostly about. So you can see here, you've got different categories. I'm slowly expanding the different categories here. We've got arithmetics, astronomy, earth sciences, neuroscience, science fiction. And then under each of those categories, if I click on one of those subcategories, or what would you call it? The topics, curriculum topics, if you want to call it that. This is where now you'll see the actual resources on this page. So for astronomy here, you'll see here, currently it's mostly videos, like I said, so the solar system song, 8 planets song, and so on and so forth. But as time goes by, there'll be more than just videos here. There'll be other tools, One of the things I definitely will need to do is to kind of scour the net to point everyone into the direction of resources that other people have put together for teaching children with. So, there's some websites out there that have lesson plans, guides for how to talk to children about certain topics and ideas and so on. So those are the kinds of things that I definitely would like to put on the site as well. And excuse me, as you can see, for older children, it's the same 4 categories. And then if I go to the STEM category here, similar topics, just a bit more complex. So if I look at the astronomy for older children one, you'll see here that it's videos mainly at the moment, but the videos are more, not so many songs and stuff like that, and more, higher level kind of stuff. And yeah, that's what the plan is. And then you've got for parents and carers, there's not much in this section at the moment, but I figured that what I need a place on this website that's going to be giving resources and ideas and advice and that sort of thing for parents and carers. And I just keep thinking about me as a young parent, and I know some of you are parents as well, young parents, how it's kind of bewildering. A lot of the whole process from conception to forever is questions. What's this? What's that? How does this work? What's breastfeeding? How does this all work? Food. What kind of food should we give them? Oh, the baby's, I don't know. The baby's burping a lot. What does that mean? Do I need to take them to hospital? So I want to try and share some of those kind of resources, some of that kind of advice here. But also, we need to learn as well as adults. So this section will be, for example, the stuff that I'm doing about vitamin D and that sort of stuff, it will go in here as well under the STEM section, about how we can live our lives, how we can understand the world we're in, and, make it, do what we can to contribute to our collective, progress, our collective struggle as Africans. So the only page I've currently got here is from Kamali Academy, which is several videos that brother Samori put out years and years and years back. Excellent brother. I think he lives in Ghana, and he has done for a while now, but from the United Snakes initially. And so I've put, a black homeschooling tips here. Really, really good stuff. Anyway, that's going to be what the website's going to be about. And I'm looking forward to the journey. I'm looking forward to the challenge of, really turning this into a website that I think it can be. And I think the kind of website that I think we need as black people, basically, and other people, but mainly black people. So if you haven't already, check out mindfulblackdad.com. And if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing, then you can, of course, do so at Patreon. Shout out to Tito District and other supporters on there. And also you can do so on Substack. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys while you're all here, so I'll just put that there. Oh, no, that's not the right thing, is it? A couple of things I wanted to run by you before we get into chapter 10. Join our mailing list at eliwananda.substack.com. There we go. Yeah. Boom. So you can sign up to the mailing list there, which is eliwananda.substack.com. So a couple of things I wanted to run by you, thoughts I'm having. One of the things I'm thinking is, one of the things I think I'm going to do currently, the model for the We Are Reading is that we do the live streams, and then I only leave a portion of I was only leaving a portion of the live streams on YouTube, and I was making the full video available for paid supporters on Patreon and Substack. But what I think I'm actually going to do now is I would like to reverse that slightly and keep the full content on YouTube for everybody to see on YouTube, regardless of whether they're a paid supporter or not. Two reasons for that is, one, I hate the idea of gatekeeping, and I hate the idea of kind of putting a financial, a financial burden between people and this knowledge that I'm merely filtering to people, if you like. What am I doing? I'm just sharing what Baba Amos Wilson has written, and what I've been finding is that the portions that I leave on YouTube, which are just the snippets, not many people are seeing those, and also YouTube isn't pushing those much, so they're not reaching many people. And actually, on the flip side, in addition to that, is that the number of people who are supporting isn't really growing much. And so, those two things are telling me that actually, are kind of confirming to me that I need to switch the model to, the content is there for everybody to see, wherever they are in the world. As long as you've got the internet connection, you can see it. But for those who would like to support this work and contribute to paying for the browser, the various StreamYard cost money, Substack, this, that, and the other. All these things kind of cost money. The hosting of the website, that all has a cost to it. And obviously, I kind of view it as like, I want to pay these things because this is my passion. This is what I'm here for. But if anyone does want to support to help those things and just to kind of provide the support, then do it. But if people can't or it's not right for them at the moment to be a paid supporter, then just that's all good as well. Let's make sure that so shout out to you, Tito Districts, my original supporter. So good. Okay, that's a great idea. She said everyone needs to get this brilliant information in its entirety. So yeah, I agree with that. Definitely. So that's going to be the model going forward. And then the other thing, before we get into the reading, the other thing I wanted to just ask you guys is whether we do the read-throughs, we do the actual reading. I read the books during our live streams, and they're going well. What I was doing previously was I would read the thing in my own time, at another time, and then I would come to the sessions and then kind of give you guys, share my understanding of the thing that the chapter that we just read. So I don't know, many of you guys who were here back in those days, I mean, Tito, you were, some of you guys who remember those that other way that we were doing it. I'm just wondering if the way that we do it now is the best way of doing it, is working well, carry on reading together, or whether we could perhaps switch to the other way around. And why am I thinking that? What's brought that to my mind? I'm not sure, but it's just a thought that's just, when I look at some of my old videos and I see that I was, I'd broken it all down already, and I'm like, giving you my synopsis of the chapter. Maybe that might be a better, that might be more, more conducive, more suitable. I don't know, but you don't have to answer now. But that's just a thought that I'm having on that. Yeah, we could. Lao Tzu said, "Are we voting on a resolution?" Yeah, you know what? We could do that. We could do. If there's a way I can put. I think StreamYard does give me some of these tools that I never really look at, but I think there might be a voting tool here. But let me know what you think. If I put here, read through live. For read through live, type 1. For read through live, type 1. For synopsis, type 2, if that makes sense. For read through live, type 1. Yeah, so if it's the wrong section. So if I put this in the banner, Paul, you didn't miss much, really, at the beginning, actually. So if I do that, and then do that, and then get rid of that. Gosh, okay, that looks very ugly. But hopefully you can get the point that I'm asking there. Is that just trying to get your thoughts on whether. Okay, that's very ugly. But if you think that if you like the reading through the book live in the sessions, then just put a number 1 in there, and we can, that's all good. But if you think it might be good for me to go back to the other format, which was giving a synopsis, read it myself, and then in the sessions I give a synopsis, put a number 2 there. But anyway, that's not a big deal. We can break that down at another time. But I just wanted to get these are thoughts I have had running around running around inside for a few weeks, and I just wanted to ask you guys what you think. Okay, anyway, let's get started. So we're on chapter 10 of Blueprint for Black Power, and I was just looking earlier. We are way into this book now. I'm impressed. We're on chapter 10, which is page 209 of a 858 page book. So we're about 2, 4, 6, 8, what's that? About nearly a quarter of the way through Blueprint for Black Power, which I think is brilliant stuff. So thank you guys for being on this journey with me. It's such a big book, and it's such a thorough, methodical book that is, it's a real intellectual exercise. It's a real intellectual exercise in to be plowing through this book page by page, week after week after week. And also, like I said in another post, the mindfulblackdad.com has come pretty much directly out of reading this book, particularly Brother Amos Wilson's emphasis on the need for us to develop African-centered education, to develop institutions around that, and to make sure that the leaders that we have in our movements and organizations and so forth are fully and clearly embedded and trained in an African-centered mindset. So that's kind of what my website, Mindful Black Dad, is all about. Basically, the ultimate aim of that site is to enable parents and other adults to rear up children to become the African-centered scholars, warriors, and leaders that we kind of need. So yeah, it's been a good stuff. This chapter today is quite a short chapter. It's only 10 pages, and yeah, it's called the candidate selection process. All right, here we go. Look, Lao Tzu said voted for number 1, which is reading through live. And Lao Tzu said, all right, so he prefers this version because This is what makes your show unique. Plus, it's a reference source for those who are daunted by reading such a thick book. It's convenient to pop up on headphones and listen to the book while working. Absolutely. Yeah, that's all good. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, it's pretty conclusive. Paul Morris agrees, voted for 1. English Gal 234 voted for 1. And I know there's another from feedback I've received, what you said, Lao Tzu, there about being able to listen to someone else reading through a book, and kind of, you know, if you can dip in and out, or at least have it playing while you're doing someone else, that kind of helps people to be able to read vicariously, kind of thing. So yeah, I kind of agree. And actually that makes it more likely for me as well to read, because if I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to find some time in the rest of the week to read these things, then I struggle often. So yeah, shout out to you guys, man. Thank you. Asanteni sana. For that confirmation. So good. Always good to get food from the item. Cool. All right. Well, let's get into chapter 10 then, of the candidate selection process. And I quite like the last sentence of chapter 9, which I've just glanced at, which is, if African peoples cannot be protected and their quality of life optimized by Black power, then what is the point? Yeah. That's the whole point of all this sort of stuff. So, okay, let's get into this then. So the candidate selection process, and this section starts with a subheading, which is the selling of the candidate. Very relevant, as Lao Tzu pointed out a couple of weeks ago. It's very, very relevant because the US, the United States, is in election season right now. It's politics time again in the US. So yeah. Okay. A brief review of our prior discussion of the special interest and policy formation processes, and the re-examination of the schematic diagram depicting the policy formation process should impress us with the fact that electoral politics, particularly as represented by the every 4 years voting ritual in the US, has relatively little to do with the actual process of day-to-day governance, policy making, and execution, or with the actual exercise of exercise of power by the mass electorate imposing its will on the US government. We have seen that democracy in America has essentially been betrayed by the domination of governmental processes by a relatively small class of power holders. This is also true of the candidate selection/election processes. The existence of an exclusive two-party electoral system, the decline in party organization, the fundamental similarities between the two parties, the need for candidates to be backed by rich contributors, large and mostly individualized staffs, to engage in very expensive media campaigns to place individual ambition, image building, and winning above dealing with substantive issues, means that the, quote, will of the people, as expressed through their voting patterns, rarely expresses itself in actual government policy, decision-making, and practical governance. Page 210. The need for a candidate to obtain strong financial backing before mounting a credible primary campaign, let alone before making a final run for political office, often means that he has been compromised, if not bought, before he presents himself to the people for election. The power to influence the process of governance begins before the election, and those groups who generally lack the monetary and/or relevant resources to influence the pre-election candidate selection process are already out of the running for achieving significant influence in the governance process. This, despite their heavy voting in favor of one candidate as against another. Yeah, that's very important. This is aptly implied by Parenti's observation that, quote, supposedly one of the great gifts of our democracy is the right to vote for the candidate of one's choice, but the choice is often narrow and or restructured by a variety of undemocratic features, unquote. Parenti, in the same vein, notes the following. Here's a long quote from Michael Parenti. Quote, the ostensible purpose of electoral competition among political parties is to hold rulers accountable. According to Western democratic theory, popular elections counteract the oligarchic tendency by institutionalizing the power of numbers. An election, like an opinion poll, is supposedly a measure of mass sentiment, but also a mandatory decision, an exercise of sovereign power by the many. The democratic goal is not only that the many shall have their say, but that their say shall have an empowering effect, that it shall both be the public opinion and the popular will. The right to free speech and dissent, even assuming such a right could be exercised without risk to the dissenter, is not democracy's sum total, but merely one of the necessary conditions for holding those in office accountable to their constituency. One can imagine a situation as exists in our better universities and prisons, in which the constituents might be free to complain of conditions, petition the authorities, read critical newspapers and books, and even write them, while exercising little or no power over decision makers. Democracy, as it is practiced by institutional oligarchs, consists of allowing others the opportunity to say what they want, while the oligarchs commanding all institutional resources continue to do what they want. Yeah. And this is of course very, very true. It probably helps to, sometimes, or it probably helps to put into context why it is that, yes, you can turn on the radio, maybe not so much these days, but you could turn on the radio back in the 90s, and yeah, you could hear Public Enemy, you could hear X-Clan, you could hear Buju Banton for that matter, or whoever, Anthony B could sing Fire Upon Rome. They did ban it in Jamaica actually, but you could have all this music out there that's cussing out Babylon. Bob Marley is a superstar. The Bob Marley film is out now, and if you really listen to his songs, actually, there's a lot of pretty, cutting edge revolutionary rhetoric in that song. Anti-capitalist, pro-black, pro-African. You can have all of that. You can have people saying all these things. But the strength of capitalism, modernity, but capitalism in particular, is that it can absorb that dissent very, very comfortably, because it's like, yeah, Chuck D, yeah, you can have your song playing on the radio 24/7. Cool, you can do that, but the children are going to go to school for 8 hours a day, and we're going to, they're not going to be hearing no X-Clan and Public Enemy and whoever it might be, Capleton in the schools. They're going to be hearing the stuff that we're going to be, and then they're going to go home, and then what they're going to see on TV is all the stuff that we're going to pour out to them. Even in this day and in this internet age, the majority of content is dominated by these few social media platforms. Their algorithms are going to decide what is seen by any. You're going to have to work really, really hard to get to a blueprint for Black Power discussion or whatever it might be. There's not many of those out there. So yeah, that's just one of the things that I often think about those anti-woke people who say, liberals are on constantly, criticizing America, constantly criticizing capitalism, and we just allow it. It's, they're going to destroy capitalism. So, no, they're not. By just talking, every now and again, that's not going to have any impact, because we're not sitting in that, that policy formation matrix. We're not in that. We're not part of that. And we're not, as a result, because of the barriers to entry to that, we're not going to be able to, really make much of a difference to that as things currently stand, actually. And then as Tito District added a really important point as well, Asante Sana, Nakushukuru Sana. So, she said that it also allows for them to be better dissect and counter the radical messages in the movement. There you go. I always think of something that Frank Wilderson pointed out in that regards, that like he argues that very point, that the secret services and all that kind of stuff, they listen very intently, probably watching this live stream. Maybe, or there's certainly some of the bigger platforms, they'll be watching very carefully. Some people somewhere in the establishment are watching carefully to just try and understand, like, what are these people on about, what's going on. Don't think that they don't know what we're talking about, which is why it's important to not make this online stuff the be all and end all of the things that we're doing. We've got to keep things in secret. Frankly, Afro pessimism always wins. There you go. Yeah, I keep going back to Frank Wilderson. I'm not I mean, not many ideas have kind of impacted on me as much as Afro pessimism has over the last few years. So shout out to the Afro pessimist and Frank Wilderson. And then Paul Morrissey said this: it's about making us believe the system works, that democracy is valid and evidenced as a reality. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's like in the UK, Paul, we've got the question time. And then, they'll often have like someone kind of radical who'll be there, like, completely disagreeing with what everyone else is saying. But it's kind of, you have to have that. Yeah, exactly. You have to have the appearance of this kind of, oh yeah, look, they got this. I got a few years ago, a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to go on Russia Today, as it was called back then, to discuss the London riots or something, to austerity. And I was a bit like, what? No, I don't want to be seen going on TV. But it's kind of that thing of they'll do that. The news channels will like, okay, who can we get to come and give us that semblance of plurality of opinions and so forth. But ultimately, as Baba Amos is going to talk about now, ultimately the oligarchs win because they run the game. Babylon makes the rules, so Babylon wins. The house always wins, as it were. So there we go. Okay, so back to Baba Amos, page 210 down at the bottom. It has been noted by a number of political scientists that the candidate selection process has become increasingly individualistic. And remember, this is 20 years before Trump. Name recognition and personal image are important assets in any politician's run for high office. And this is also before Obama, for that matter, who kind of paved the way for Trump with this cult of the personality kind of thing, I'd perhaps argue. However, the candidate's personal ability to buy the kinds of services with which to achieve recognition, to publicize his or her positions and abilities, is often very limited. Page 211. Herbert Alexander, and this is from a book called Financing Politics in 1976, cited in Domhoff, The Powers That Be. So Herbert Alexander concluded from his study of how political campaigns are financed that, quote, because of its ability to buy the kinds of services that produce name recognition and exposition of positions, money wields its greatest influence on campaigns, particularly presidential races, during the pre-nomination period, unquote. Consequently, candidates become vulnerable to the influence of fat cats, effective fundraisers, and the contributions of political action committees, which are shortened to PACs, many of which are connected directly or indirectly with the corporate oligarchy. The ability of the power elite to provide crucial financial support for both parties on the national level generally far outweighs that of the unions and other sources of funding more closely related to the masses of the population. Domhoff argues that through relatively simple and direct means and large campaign contributions, members of the ruling class can, in good measure, dominate the candidate selection process as prospective office holders seek to distinguish themselves from their competitors and to project an image which will compel the electorate to vote for them. He goes on to argue, quote, in the guise of fat cats and money raisers, the same men who direct corporations and take part in policy groups play a central role in the careers of most politicians who advance beyond the local level or state legislatures in states of any size and consequence. Recruitment of elective elites remains closely associated, especially for the more important offices in the larger states, with the candidate's wealth or access to large campaign contributions. Moreover, the role of the wealthy donor and the fundraiser seems to be especially crucial in the nomination phase of the process. This was the conclusion of one of the earliest systematic studies of campaign finance, unquote. The The legitimacy of the electoral system is put into serious question in light of the central role played by heavy campaign contributions and services provided by the ruling elite and those under its ideological influence. The legitimacy of this system is especially questionable when one looks at the products of the candidate selection process. This system generally produces a legislative and governmental system top-heavy with lawyers and other professional go-betweens. And then another quote, the major results of the candidate selection process are, first, a large number of well-to-do politicians who are eager and willing to go along to get along, precisely the kind of politicians who are necessary if the special interest process is to operate the way it does. And going into page 212 now, a great many politicians with few strong policy positions of their own, who are thus open to the suggestions put forth to them by the corporate executives and academic experts who have been legitimated as serious statesmen and leaders within the institutions of the policy planning process. In other words, the evidence shows that the candidate selection process naturally produces the kinds of elected officials whom we know must be in office because of the ways in which the special interest and policy planning processes operate. We can begin to see why the three processes mesh together so well, even though they are relatively independent. So the three processes are the candidate selection process, the policy formation process, and the special interest process. Yeah. So that's the end of that section. Bob Amos Wilson is just pointing out, kind of bringing together the previous two chapters that we've read, and he's basically pointing out that we get the candidates that the system is designed to produce, which is candidates who are either rich and already aligned, their interests already aligned with the elite financial corporate interests, which are behind all of this stuff, or else they're people who, useful idiots. Maybe Obama falls into this category. Useful idiots who are like, they're not that strong in anything in particular, so they'll be very malleable and easy for the elite, kind of this system that we're breaking down, to direct into the, to point in the direction that they want them to go in as far as policies and all that sort of stuff is concerned. So yeah, nothing controversial there so far, I think. Then the next section here is called party politics. Party politics, and of course, all of this is in the realm of the American context, which is what Baba Amos Wilson, he was in that context and he was most familiar with the context. So it's good to be, I'm learning more about the American political system from reading this book than I have from reading any other book, or my knowledge about that system has exponentially increased as a result of all of this stuff. Although I kind of knew it in broad brushstrokes, but this is like going into a bit more detail, which is good stuff. So page 212, party politics. Another outcome of the American candidate selection process, dominated by big money and ruling elite influence, is a two-party system which downplays, discourages, or ignores substantive policies, issues, and discussions, neglects the political education of its constituencies, does not satisfy voter preferences, and which produces two major parties whose ideological orientations are many times barely distinguishable, and whose political views and goals overlap at many important points. The blurry difference between the two parties has led one Labour leader to wryly observe that, quote, "We don't have a two-party system in this country. We have the Demopublicans," unquote, or the Repubcrats? Anyway, Demopublicans sounds better. It is one party of the corporate class with two wings, the Democrats and the Republicans. Domhoff argues that the, quote, "major effect of the two-party system in the United States is that it discourages policy discussion, political education, and any attempt to satisfy majority preference rather than encouraging them." Yeah, so it discourages those things rather than encourages those things. It helps to create the confusion and disinterest for which pluralists constantly scold the general public, unquote. Parenti asserts that though there are enough discernible differences between the party to prohibit their being accurately described as identical twins, the differences are not wide enough to prohibit their identification as fraternal twins. He contends that, quote, on most fundamental economic class issues, the similarities between the parties loom so large as frequently to obscure the differences. Once the Democratic and Republican parties are committed to the preservation of, both the Democratic and Republican parties are committed to the preservation of the private corporate economy, huge military budgets, the use of subsidies, deficit spending and tax allowances to bolster business profits, the funneling of public resources through private conduits, including whole new industries developed at public expense, the use of repression against opponents of the existing class structure, the defense of the multinational corporate empire, and, page 213, intervention against social revolutionary elements abroad. In short, Republicans and Democrats are dedicated to strikingly similar definitions of the public interest at great cost to the life chances of underprivileged people at home and abroad, unquote. And ain't that the truth? Same in the UK as well. Labour and the Conservatives. Labour would be broadly the British version of the Democrat Party. The Conservatives would be, broadly speaking, the British version of the Republicans. But it's the Labour. You'd think that means, that maybe the Labour Party are less warlike and all this sort of. The Labour Party has spilt so much blood in defence of empire over the last 60, 70 years of its existence. It was the Labour Party who did the Gulf, the 2003 attack on Iraq. It was the Labour Party who joined in with the Afghanistan stuff. It was the Labour, I believe it was the Labour Party who did the attack on. Anyway, I think it might have been maybe the Labour Party was in power when they attacked Libya, possibly. But in any case, there's no difference. It was under the Labour Party, for example, large chunks of time the Labour Party was in power when they were fighting. Britain was fighting to stop Africans and Asians and other people from breaking the yoke of colonial rule. There's the Labour parties are the same ones who, have continued to refuse to apologize for what they did in Kenya, the brutality that they meted out on my people in Kenya, in the so-called Mau Mau struggles and all that sort of stuff. So they're all the same. They're basically all the same. People in the UK now are probably getting quite gassed because they think, yay, the Conservatives are going to be voted out, because they definitely will be voted out this year in the general election. But some of these idiots are going to think that the Labour Party are going to come in and just, hey, it's going to be a social revolutionary. No, it's not. It's just going to be the same, maybe with just better rhetoric, slightly less overt racism, slightly less overt anti-immigrant sentiment. They'll tone that stuff down, but basically it's going to be exactly the same thing. So page 213, Grader, that's pronounced correctly, argues that the Democratic Party as a political organization is no longer quite real itself. It exerts as historical artifact and organization fiction. It acts neither as a faithful mediator between citizens and the government, nor as the forum for policy debate and resolution, nor even as a structure around which political power can accumulate. So Lao Tzu, you asked a question there. You said, did the British not just sign up for Operation Prosperity to fight the Houthis? Yeah, with the US co-signer in genocide. Yeah, Britain's always there. Generally speaking, and this really escalated under Tony Blair in the 90s and noughties, Britain was always there, ready to. The attack on Iraq, it was pretty much just Britain, if I recall correctly, who went out there and gave George W. Bush the sort of the moral cover to go and launch what they launched. And yeah, Britain's always there. They bombed Iraq, they bombed Libya. They, you know, very, very, very violent country, Britain, when you look at its foreign policy. Very, very violent, very anti-immigrant, very hostile to the interest of the global South, quote unquote, you know. So, I mean, it was just seeing the reaction of the British state, the executive anyway, when Israel started its bombardment of Gaza, and both because the government and the opposition, the Labour opposition, the people, the Labour Party, the Labour Party, the people of Labour, you know, and they were all there saying, they'll be asked, so Israel has turned off all the water to the people in Palestine. Is that good? Is that not bad? Is that not probably a war crime? And I remember, you know, Keir Starmer would be saying, Israel has a right to defend itself. It's like, you know, this is the Labour Party. It just shows you that words mean nothing. How can you be the party of Labour when you're perfectly happy for your country to go and basically exterminate others in other parts of the world? You know, shocking. No, shocking is not the right word. Disgusting is the right word. And then Lao Tzu said millions of dollars in the military campaign could be used to strengthen the weak British economy. Yeah, no doubt. But then, you know, unfortunately, the British masses here probably largely support these wars because it feeds into their empire. What's the word? Hallucination. They think people in this country still think that they have an empire. They still think it's 1824 rather than 2024. They still think, unfortunately, that Britain is like this colossus on the global stage who will, you know, and I've said before that like it's always funny when China and other countries kind of just say, we don't care about Britain. You know, you're not really a major player in our economy. So you know, there was that clip I saw on Twitter where some Chinese bureaucrat was basically saying that very point. Like, listen, Britain, it's not about you. I don't know why you're getting so excited about us. We don't really care that much about you. You know, because they know they could just destroy Britain in an instance, and Britain really depends on China economically as well. So, yeah, it's a funny thing. Yeah, and then Tito District. Yeah, this is the thing. Tito District said, I heard that around Brexit they were talking about trying to reconstitute the Commonwealth countries. Yeah, I mean Brexit. I was thinking about the Brexit referendum earlier because it's been an absolute. We're still in that. It's nearly 10 years since it actually happened. 2016 it was. So it's crazy how fast that has gone by. But it was a real, very fascinating insight into some of these things that we're talking about. As I've said, I think I've said before that the Brexit referendum kind of did pull the rug out from under the feet of the ruling elite. They weren't actually prepared for that. They were doing all this, you know, political maneuvering to try and keep basically the Conservative Party were trying to keep the very, very, very extreme right under control to stop them from going to join UKIP, which was the United Kingdom Independence Party, who were very right-wing, very anti-immigrant, trying to get Britain to leave the EU. The Conservatives thought, okay, we'll give a referendum. We're going to have a referendum to keep people voting for them who are anti-Europe, anti-EU, thinking that they'd win easily. And then obviously they lost the referendum. You know, the British people voted to leave overall. Then it was like, oh, no, let's do another one. Actually, best out of three. All this stuff, and it was fascinating to see like this crisis of legitimacy in the British political system. But yeah, one of the main things that kept coming up was like, yeah, let's cut ourselves off from the EU, and then we could go and re-establish our ties with the Commonwealth countries. You know, our brothers and sisters in the Commonwealth. What they really meant, of course, they weren't talking about mine and your people, Tito. They weren't talking about Zimbabwe. They weren't talking about. Well, I mean, they weren't talking about Black Zimbabweans. They weren't talking about Kenyans and Ugandans, and they definitely weren't talking about Nigerians or Indians. They were talking about Australians and Canadians and New Zealanders and white South Africans. That's who they were talking about. And it's this mythology of we've got this great amazing relationship with all these people from our Commonwealth, our brethren from the Commonwealth. It's like, dude, like, I don't even know why our stupid countries are even still in these flipping Commonwealths. Like, it's not a Commonwealth. it's our wealth being taken by Britain. That's what it is. So yeah. And then Paul Morris said, "This is more complex." Always count on Paul to, get us thinking clearly. Paul said, USA and Britain petitioned for China to be one of the 5 permanent states, executive states of the UN Security Councils. UK still has a lot of power. Yeah, UK has power, but in the wider scheme of things, its power is nothing like what it was at the time when it petitioned the UN, for example. From the 1950s, it's not what it was in the 1950s. Even the fact that Britain petitioned for the UK to China to be one of the 5 permanent states, I'd imagine that's because the USA told them to. And the reason that they would have done that is because, particularly at that time, the USA was cozying up to the newly emerging Mao's newly emerging China, and the other, as a bulwark, however that word is pronounced, against the Soviet Union. Because the Soviet Union and China in them days, in 1950s, certainly 60s, I think 70s as well. I mean, I think they came close to war a couple of times. Real friction between the two of them after initially having been, they're supposed to be both communists, so they should have been allies. But there's real friction between them. And so I would imagine that would have been the rationale behind that. And also just because when you see a power that is as strong as that, you can't keep them out. You have to keep them on board. The Americans, I've got to give a shout out to the butcher of half the world, Mr. Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, and Nixon, because they had the foresight to see in 1970 that China, they saw the future with regard to China, and they saw that China was going to become an economic superpower, a political superpower. And so they built bridges. They went and started meeting, built diplomatic ties and so forth. The Soviets were disgusted at this, but it's that realpolitik that Kissinger talked about, which is where you kind of do the things which are going to meet your best interests at that particular given time. And in a lot of ways, your traditional allegiances and maybe even some of your cultural mores have to go out the window, and you just have to ally yourself with whoever it is that's going to be best for you to ally with at that given time. But yeah, of course, Britain has power. Britain is one of the most powerful countries in the world still, but one of the most, as in maybe like the fourth or fifth. So whereas it was the global superpower 150 years ago, it is now significantly behind China, significantly behind the United States, obviously significantly behind the Russia, and there's probably an argument to be made that the EU actually, by divorcing itself from the European Union, Britain has divorced itself from its only route to actual genuinely being considered a superpower in its own right, or because the EU is a big block now. If you remember, sorry to keep going on about the EU, but after the Brexit referendum, Guy Verhofstadt, or some Belgian very hawkish EU guy, came out and said, "Listen, good, Britain's gone. F off, basically. Get out. We don't want them anymore. Now we can get on with creating an EU army. Russia is getting stronger. We need to create an EU army. We need to make sure we're ready for what's coming ahead." The EU, for all its faults, is Europe's best hope for remaining as a global, right at the pinnacle, of resisting the advance of the age-old foes from the East. Russia has always been a foe of Europe, always the menacing specter there that all would-be kind of European empires have had to contend with, from Napoleon, of course. Napoleon went and his empire died when they tried to invade Russia. I've got a lot of respect for Russia, for whatever the ins and outs of what happens there and all that sort of stuff. You have to respect this history that they have with regard to the people who have tried to come and invade them. Hitler, the Germans, starting under Bismarck and all that sort of stuff, but certainly under Hitler. Again, they got too big for their boots and thought that they could go and invade Russia, conquer Russia before then finishing with them and then going back west to beat Britain. probably if the Germans hadn't have done that, they would have probably defeated Britain, and they would have probably easily defeated, conquered all of Western Europe, and then had all of their forces ready to go and face Russia. But they didn't. They tried to have two fronts, and then the Russians, sucked them in. Yes, come invade Russia, come and invade Ukraine. You come in the winter, come in the summer. But what we'll do, we'll stop you fighting too hard. We'll not let you fight us openly. We'll hide away in the streets and the ghettos, and then the Russian winter will come, and the Russian winter will kill all of you in the Russian snow. And that's what basically happened there, was that Hitler's armies got brutally massacred by the winter, and then once winter started ending, the Russians just poured out and trampled all over them. So the point of all of that is to say that of course Britain is still a power, but it's not the power that it was. Put it that way. And I was waiting for someone to say something about the accent, so thank you, Tito District. And then Paul said, "Great Russian accent. I need to employ." Yeah, just hook me up, man. Hook me up. It's a good accent to do, because it's they talk very clearly. And sorry to any Russians who happen to be tuning in. Hopefully you've seen I have a lot of respect for your people and your culture, and there you go. Anyway, cool. So we were talking about how the Democratic Party is actually not really a party, and then back onto page 213, we read this. It says, like the Republican Party, the Democratic Party essentially regards the vast majority of its rank and file members or grassroots supporters as an impediment to governing. They are sensitive to the public mood and constantly measure its pulse by means of opinion polls, surveys, and the like. This partisan interest in public opinion polls and focus groups is not designed to enhance their responsivity to the electorate and to produce responsive government, but to manipulate the public mood in order to win office. The people and their welfare are not the end of the electoral process, but merely the means for winning. For both parties, electioneering is more of a social device for selling to the public, for shaping its opinion, than for standing to account for past behavior and receiving instructions from the public regarding governance and policy decisions. The Republican Party is currently notorious for the strategy that requires the party to agitate latent emotional resentment and turn them into marketable political traits. The new raw materials for this are drawn from enduring social aggravations, wounds of race, class, and religion, and even sex. And actually, just to say, Baba Amos Wilson here says that's a Republican Party Grider. This is from Grader. We're saying the Republican Party are notorious for that. Actually, you probably argue that these days the Democrats and the sort of liberals in general, with identity politics and all this sort of stuff, they've become very, very, very. That's the name of the game now. Politics. It's all about grievances, race grievances, gender grievances, gender identity grievances these days, sexuality grievances. That's what people and talking about Brexit. That's what Brexit was all about. This latent annoyance about immigration, this latent kind of anti-blackness and anti-immigration thing that is always alive and well here in the UK. Always gets whipped up here in the UK. So this strategy, which centers around projecting the idea that the white populace is threatened by overwhelming alien forces, particularly black criminals and blacks demanding welfare and special entitlements, is not a strategy for governance. Again, as Grader notes, the party's method deliberately coaxes emotional responses from people, teases their anxieties over values they hold important in their own lives, but then walks away from the anger and proceeds to govern on its real agenda, defending the upper class interest of wealth and corporate power. He concludes that the Republican Party is not a party of conservative ideology. It is just a party of conservative clients. Wherever possible, the ideology will be invoked as justification for taking care of their clients' needs. When the two are in conflict, the conservative principles are discarded and their clients are served. And again, Brexit, that's Brexit. You know, I think that since Brexit, since the United Kingdom actually left the European Union, the immigration numbers have actually gone up. More people are migrating to the UK than did when the UK was in the European Union. And the fact of the matter is that the elites love immigration. They love it. They want more and more and more of it because they don't care about all this, local culture and keeping British culture. They don't give a damn about all that. What they're interested in is cha-ching, So, and cha-ching means outsourcing work. Cha-ching means, selling off the country, selling off property and land. Huge swathes of London are now owned and controlled by, Chinese oligarchs, Russian oligarchs, and this, that. That's Britain's basically becoming even more of a casino state than it was before. It kind of always has been for a long time, but it's becoming even more so. And so, yeah, all these people who thought that Brexit was going to, bring an end to immigration, it was going to result in, more sovereignty and more say over how the country's run. So it's not, you fools, you foolish people. That was the rhetoric, but it never was going to end up in that. Peace to you, the pro-Black perspective, brother Oni. Shout out to you, always a blessing, always a pleasure. And then Lao Tzu said, here in the USA, there is the great fear of an invasion from South America versus via Mexico. Yeah. There you go. It's the same thing. We've got in the United Kingdom, we've got the English Channel. There was a whole absolute huge thing about the fact that some people were coming on small boats and sailing into the UK. It's like we need to stop these boats. People talking about maybe open firing on them, and that I think if they created this massive floating ship prison that they want to put these people on, sending asylum seekers to Rwanda, that infamous Rwanda plan, all this sort of stuff. Meanwhile, not really much attention on what I was talking about. The fact that so much of our properties in London are owned by land banking corporate elites, foreign corporate elites. Not much conversation about that, obviously, because that suits their interest, but it also suits the interest of these elites to kind of keep the British people worrying about these boats. Same with mainland Europe. There's thousands of our African people cross over that English Channel the Mediterranean every year. Many of them, hundreds of them die every year because of this terror. And yet, like Baba Amos Wilson's here saying, is that those are just things to keep people in line and keep them voting in the correct way, to keep the right parts of the elite in power. Because substantively, when you look at the actual policies, none of the people's interests really get met unless they happen to fortuitously coincide with the interests of the elite at any given time. So where was I? Sorry, 214. Here we go. Just a few more pages, about five more pages. Shout out to everyone, by the way. Make sure you like the video and share the video if you would as well. Much appreciated. And then you can sign up as well if you want to join my mailing list and maybe support the work that I'm doing. You could do so at Patreon, or you could do so at eliwananda.substack.com, which is scrolling across the screen at the bottom. So page 214. However, the contemporary Democratic Party does not differ significantly from its Republican counterpart with respect to servicing the interests of the ruling white male, corporate, and wealthy elite. The contemporary leadership of this party, the Democratic Leadership Council, or DLC, is determined to jettison the party's image of being beholden to left-of-centre interest groups, racial minorities, labour unions, women's rights groups, and the like, and return it to the quote-unquote mainstream. The boundaries of the mainstream, as Grider argues, is defined by the DLC's donors from corporate America, i.e. ARCO, American Petroleum, Dow Chemical, Prudential, BACHE, BACHE, Prudential, whatever that word is, Georgia Pacific, Martin Marietta. One of the major objectives of the Democratic Party leadership is to distance the party from its association in the collective psyche of the white suburban America with predominantly inner-city Black America. This distancing process is symbolized by the Democratic Party leadership's distancing treatment of Jesse Jackson, the major spokesman for Blacks and other minorities and for the progressive wing of the party. To the broad white electorate, the party's relationship with Jackson, its visible treatment of him, is synonymous with or emblematic of its relationship with African Americans and its attitudes toward and treatment of progressive, anti-elitist, anti-capitalist groups in general. The distancing process undertaken by the Democratic Party leadership, in effect, compelled it to reject the claims and influence of some of its most loyal constituent groups. Grader thus explains the objectives of the DLC at a 1990 conference in New Orleans as follows. The DLC's main objective was an attack on the Democratic Party's core constituencies, labor, school teachers, women's rights groups, peace and disarmament activists, the racial minorities and supporters of affirmative action. Its stated goal was to restore the party's appeal to disaffected white males, especially in the South, but the DLC's discussions did not focus on the economic decline affecting these citizens. Instead, it promoted the notion that Democrats must distance themselves from the demands of women or Blacks or other aggrieved groups within the party. The Reverend Jesse Jackson and his provocative economic agenda aimed at workers, white and Black, was a favorite target of the DLC. And on Capitol Hill, the DLC was sometimes waggishly referred to as the White Boys Caucus. Thus, in addition to all its organizational weaknesses, the Democratic Party is divided by nasty ideological combat between the party's Washington elites and its rank and file constituencies. The people at the grassroots who are most active in democratic politics. The establishment's quarrel was with the party's own voters. Page 215. The people they belittled as activists and interest groups were the very people who cared most intensely about public issues and who formed the faithful core of the party's electorate, win or lose. The Democratic establishment did not wish to initiate a dialogue with these citizens, only to make them go away or at least keep their mouth shut. The party elite had no intention of sharing its own policy deliberations with Democrats at large or trying to re-engage people in governing politics by building the organizational connections that had been lost. The elites wished only to form a governing consensus around the supposed mainstream, their mainstream, the one they have already formulated in Washington, unquote. And that's very, very, very similar to the Labour Party in the United Kingdom. Very, very, very similar. They go through this periodical process of cutting out the what they consider to be the far left. They'll cut them off. Jeremy Corbyn, who, you know, he was the leader not even 5 years ago. What, 4 years ago? He was a leader about 4 or 5 years ago. And now he's being kicked out of the Labour Party, you know, and then similarly, yeah, this always happens. They eventually, once they get kicked out of power, usually they turn on the radicals. They turn on the racial minorities and say, listen, we can't, either you guys be quiet because you guys talking about this during elections is just scaring away the mainstream voter. So you be quiet, they usually say. And then when we get into power, then we can start to address these issues of race and, you know, class. Yes, we can talk about those, but not now because you'll just scare away the middle class white voters. And obviously they get into power the time never comes. It's never the time, you know. Lao Tzu, thank you, brother, my brother. He said, Jesse Jackson's speech to the DLC in 1990 was outstanding. Hard to find a full copy. Interesting. I don't remember it myself. I was a bit too young to be following politics that closely in America, at least. But we'll look out for that. We'll look out for that. Jesse Jackson, eh? Goodness. All right. Then page 215 again. Thus, as Grader surmises, in the contemporary Democratic Party, the regulars at the grassroots are regarded as an impediment to governing. And the major impediment to governing is the troubling presence of Black America. This is not only the case for the Democratic Party, but for the Republican Party as well. This is the case for the white American nation within a nation, period. And then here we go, the last few pages here now focuses on Black people. Black people, you melanated people. So last section here is called, well, begins with Blacks, the primary impediment to governing. Let's have a look at this. At the center of American politics and governance stands the alien presence of Black America. This presence is white America's #1 domestic issue and problem. This presence, in its own particular way or peculiar way, very significantly defines the shape and character of the collective white American psyche and body politic. This group, the African American community, intrudes disturbingly into white consciousness as insistently and persistently as white America seeks to exclude it from its midst and to deny and distort its reality through projective and self-deceptive stereotyping processes. Thomas and Mary Etzel cut right to the heart of the matter in their introductory remarks to an article titled Race, published in the Atlantic Monthly in May 1991. Quote, race is no longer a straightforward, morally unambiguous force in American politics. Instead, considerations of race are now deeply embedded in the strategy and tactics of politics, in competing concepts of the function and responsibility of government, and in each voter's conceptual structure of moral and partisan identity. Race helps define liberal and conservative ideologies, shapes the presidential coalitions of the Democratic and Republican parties. It provides a harsh new dimension to concern over taxes and crime, drives a wedge through alliances of the working classes and the poor, and gives both momentum and vitality to the drive to establish a national majority inclined by income and demography to support policies benefiting the affluent and upper middle class, page 216. In terms of policy, race has played a critical role in the creation of a political system that has tolerated, if not supported, the growth of the disparity between rich and poor over the last 15 years. Race-coded images and language changed the course of the 1980, 1984, and 1988 presidential elections and the 1990 elections for the governorships of California and Alabama, the US Senate in North Carolina, and the post of Texas Secretary of Agriculture. So in all those cases, there'll be like a particular example of those things. I guess one of the examples of those would be, one of those elections, 84 it might have been, or 80, was when, was there a story about, was it the one where there was a story about these black boys who were accused of killing some white woman or raping a white woman or something like that? One of these kind of stories basically came out during election season, and like it basically galvanized one of the parties who went on to win. Probably the Republicans went on to win this because of this story about this alleged example of black depravity kind of thing. So I guess these are the kind of things that that is being talked about in this quote. Maybe someone could, maybe Lao Tzu, you might remember, you might know what I'm talking about here, or hinting at. There was something, some kind of story that came out, and then the Republicans like really milked it and started to go all out on the, you know, we've got to get we've got to deal with these black savages. We've got to deal with these black savages. They're going to just kill all of you. We've got to get onto crime. We've got to punish crime because these crackhead blacks are going to destroy us all. Something, something on those lines. I think it probably was the 1988 election, probably, because that kind of fits with the crack epidemic and stuff like that. But yeah, Central Park. Yeah, that was the one. The one, yeah. It must have been that one, yeah. At some point in the 80s, the Central Park rape, which Donald Trump, I believe, called for them to be executed. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Paul. So, the political role of race is subtle and complex, requiring listening to those whose views are deeply repellent to some and deeply resonant for others. The debate over racial policy has been skewed and distorted by a profound failure to listen, unquote. The Edsels give further evidence of the antipathy many in the white American nation have for African Americans in reporting the results of an analysis of the attitudes of white Reagan Democrats, i.e. white nominally Democrats who supported Ronald Reagan and the Republican Party politics during the past decade. So he's talking about during the 1990s and 80s. And this is another quote from the Edsels. The views of the working class defectors from the Democratic Party were examined in a 1985 study of suburban Detroit by Stanley Greenberg, the president of the Analysis Group, a Democratic polling firm. The study found that, and again, all the same kinds of things as this happen in the UK here, all the same dynamics. The left of centre party wanting to, losing some of its voters. So Brexit was a great example of this. Like a load of people defected from Labour to vote for the Conservatives because they felt that Conservatives was the party that was going to make Brexit happen. The whole mantra of the 2019 general election was get Brexit done or something like that. So a bunch of normally left-leaning Labour Party supporters in the north of the country, the poorer part of the country, voted for the Conservatives for the first time en masse. And that helped the Conservatives to have a landslide victory. And it's the same kind of thing here. The Labour Party has spent the best part of the last few years trying to move itself further and further toward the Conservatives to win back those, these racists. Who, these floating voter racists who used to vote Labour all the time, but just their anti-immigration sentiment just compelled them to go and, defect. So, quote, these white democratic defectors express a profound distaste for blacks, a sentiment that pervades almost everything they think about government and politics. Blacks constitute the explanation for their vulnerability. This is the defectors' vulnerability, and for almost everything that has gone wrong in their lives. Not being black is what constitutes being middle class. Not living with blacks is what makes a neighborhood a decent place to live. These sentiments have important implications for Democrats, as virtually all progressive symbols and themes have been redefined in racial and pejorative terms. The special status of blacks is perceived by almost all of these individuals as a serious obstacle to their personal advancement. Indeed, discrimination against whites has become a well-assimilated and ready explanation for their status, vulnerability, and failures. And of course, unquote. And of course, what Baba Amos Wilson was talking about there, or is reporting on here, has just kept on going, didn't it, to the present day? This idea that it's the blacks, it's because of the blacks. It's the blacks' fault that the white working, it's the the opioid crisis. It's because of black people. Unemployment, mass unemployment, is because of black people. Everything's because of black people, and that's different here in the UK. The black people are not so central in the political imagination as they are in the UK. In the US, partly because there's so few of us, proportionally speaking, and our history in this country is much newer than it is. And obviously, Africans were the foundation stone of the United States. But it's similar. Thank you, Lao Tzu. That was it. That sounds familiar. The Willie Horton. Yeah, used by George Bush Republican candidate. Yeah, the Willie Horton, this whole thing about this guy, this supposedly really demonically evil black guy who, you know, was a super criminal, super whatever it was. And then I remember watching a documentary showing how the Republicans used that, and they started to splice in their party political broadcasts. You know, they had a few of these broadcasts which are basically, was it just in New York, that were like all about this guy, and it was like, if you vote for the Democrats, you're voting for people like Willie Horton. You know, he's a Democrat. You know, and then the Central Park Five were found to be innocent. Gosh, when you start thinking about these things, like, it's probably best that we don't have these things on our minds too much because of the heavy burden of it. I don't know, but when some of these things that you forget about, or that's just in the back of your mind, you forget about, like, all these things that have happened, the depravity and the hostility toward black people is just astonishing at times. Okay, so the last section here, as Baba Amos Wilson often does, he's going to end this chapter now with a section called "The Need for a Black Political Party." So this is what he often does in all these chapters. He'll talk about the issues, talk about the problem, and then he'll say, right, here's a solution for you. And that's great, because it's providing a solution or suggesting a solution or puts you up to be shot down. You know, as soon as you say, I think we should do this, straight away, many people are going to come and say, no, we can't do that because X, Y, Z. No, that's, you know, let's set up a black political party. No, that's just reformism. Let's set up a black economic network of, that's just black capitalism. Let's set up an armed, you know, set up some kind of armed resistance group. That's just, you know, empty ultra left rhetoric. You're never going to do that. That's just, you know what I mean? So most of the time, most of the time people don't give solutions because A, they probably haven't thought too deeply about what solutions are to some of these problems, but also B, it's just easier to just keep talking about what's wrong and never really talking about what could make things better. So here we go. The need for a black political party. Last 3 pages of the book, page 216. The foregoing discussion should strongly indicate that Black America is in no important way an assimilated part of white America. The latter community is a nation unto itself, an exclusively white American nation within a nation. The former is i.e. African American nation, is a diffused, essentially reactionary and loosely organized, overly inclusive community lacking the self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and types of social attitudes, relations, and institutions which can actualize, organize, and apply its relatively abundant power potential. Page 217 we are at now. The African American community is excluded from the decision-making and governance processes of the white nation which dominates and exploits it. It is excluded from the policy planning and formation networks which guide or influence governmental policy. It has no effective African American funded lobbying and political action organizations which can influence governmental and electoral processes in its favor. Not only is the African American community and its representatives excluded from the power centers of white America, it has now been excluded for all practical purposes from the National Democratic Party. This party and its Republican counterpart go to great lengths to dissociate themselves from being perceived as advocates for Black community interests and concerns. The firm establishment of this dissociation in the minds of the predominant white electorate is seen as the key to gaining presidential office and many other national and state offices by both parties. Thus, African Americans are indeed excluded from significant influence in governance and in the two parties which share the governance process between them. And it just makes me think of how when Obama, was it during the election, his first election, where he did that speech about Black people need to do better. Black men need to stop leaving their children, stay at home, all this sort of stuff. That was like his, because obviously he had this whole being half Black himself. It's like oh, how's this going to go down with the, with these white Americans? So he had to very carefully curate an image of himself as being this, yes, black, yes, kind of left leaning, but certainly no, I'm not here. He wasn't here for black people. He's here for everybody. And so he had to criticize black people. Do you remember the Jeremiah Wright, his pastor that he used to go to this church? And Jeremiah Wright was someone who was much more on a kind of African black nationalist kind of radical thing, and obviously he had to dissociate himself from Jeremiah Wright and all that sort of stuff. That just made me think of that. Oh, and then pro-back perspective. Thank you for this, bro. You said that you shut down those fake solutions pretty well, though. You just shut down black political party. What do you think about this solution here? Well, yeah, this is the thing, that when you've got it's easy to say, well, the black political party, that's just reformism. And it's like, cool, okay, cool. Nothing to see here. Let's go. It's just reformism. It's fine. You're just keeping capitalism. You're just keeping it going. You're not going to overthrow the system. So let's go. But, we talk about this quite a lot in these streams. We need to do something. And yes, I get it that maybe there's that saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. And a black political party, yes, it's not going to be perfect, but it could potentially make things a lot better than it is now. And there's always that thing of, yeah, but if we put our energy into this thing, which is basically like just keeping the system going, then we're keeping the system going. What we should do is put our energy in something that is going to completely overthrow the system. But then how do you go from A to B? How do you go from 0 to 5,000 like that in one step? You can't. There has to be an incremental, iterative process, to use a word that I talk about my website with. As we iterative process. So, I've become much more, I think we talked about this in a previous stream. I've become a lot more interested in some of these mundane within the system things that people are doing, because they help to lay a foundation for others to build something more radical, in theory anyway. So let's see, what do we think about this black political party idea that Baba Amos Wilson is gonna say here? Let's read it. So the exclusion problem alluded to above can be solved in many ways. So obviously he's talking about how do African Americans solve the problem of being excluded from mainstream, quote unquote, politics. Well, that's an assumption there that's an aim to be included in mainstream political politics. Depending on where you stand, you might disagree with that, but let's hear him out. In the context of this chapter, one of the possible solutions points to the full development of an independent African American political party. One of the possible solutions. While we harbor no illusion about the ability of such an organization to win national office, that would not be its primary purpose. We believe that it could, both as a single party and in coalition with other similar parties, very significantly influence presidential, statewide, and local candidate selection and election processes, and more importantly, favorably impact the decision-making and governance processes on the international, national, state, and local levels. More determining than running for office and winning elections, an independent black political party would be able to do the following things. And this is a long list. This is like 14 things going into page 218 here. One, so this independent black political party could do these things. One, articulate and debate major issues relevant to African Americans. Two, formulate coherent and distinct programs designed to realize the important interests of African Americans. Three, implement national, state, and local programs, whether in and out of office. Four, fund the cost of gathering information and developing policies. Page 218. Five, raise and organize money in order to engage in the process of developing leading ideas and goals that will form the African American community's internal and public policy agendas and strategies for actualizing its interests. 6, undertake the responsibility of overseeing federal, state, and local law writing and enforcement in the community. 7, serve as a civic agency which assists African American communities with their concrete needs. 8, act as a faithful mediator between the African American community and the US government and foreign governments, as well as the governments of the Africa and African and Caribbean nations. And you probably extend that to the countries with large African populations within them, Brazil, Colombia, and so on. Number 9, serve as a forum for policy debate and resolution and as a structure around which political and economic power can accumulate. 10, serve as a communiversity, a university for the people, an educational institution where the people discover how the world really works. I like that. Serve as a place where people can learn mutual trust, loyalty, purpose, and a collective activity to draw together in relationships which lead to real potent political and economic power. Communiversity, I like that. 11, serve as the means for training and developing leaders, experts, and community organizers, foster research and development projects, and provide a nationally coordinated network of political and economic administrative centers in order to carry out local, regional, national, and international programs and policies according to a democratically sanctioned strategy. 12, serve as a primary source for the development of concentrated. I might cut out there. And yeah, Lao Tzu said, and the African nature, the Africans in Britain as well. Yeah. 12, serve as a primary source for the development of concentrated cooperative and private business enterprises, trade associations for the development of financial resources of African American personal, communal, and business success and prosperity. Provide the means for supporting the social, industrial, technical, and business training of African Americans. 13, maintain an independent, highly informative, ethnically committed media center. And finally, 14, promote Pan-African cultural unity and development through the study of African history and culture and through serving as a conduit for cultural and economic exchange between African peoples across the diaspora. And then the last paragraph here, which is on page 219 of the chapter, says the scope of this volume will not allow us to detail the process of developing, organizing, and administering an independent Black political party. However, we think a basic caveat is in place here. Such a party should not permit dual party membership. That is, African Americans who are members of other political parties, including and especially those belonging to the Democratic and Republican parties, should not be admitted membership into a Black political independent party at all. Should not be admitted membership into a Black independent party under no circumstances. No Black politicians affiliated with any other party should be allowed entree at any level of the organization. They should be dealt with as members of rival parties. Persons and groups representing Marxist, communist, or Eurocentric ideological leanings should be discouraged from seeking membership. The party should be secularly led, i.e. not led by preachers or other religious leaders. While their membership is welcome, the party should not become the battleground for religious, sectarian interest or moralizing institutions. The party's orientation should be clearly Black nationalist in character and intention, definitely not assimilationist and integrationist in the traditional sense. And the last sentence, while open and willing to enter into advantageous coalitions with other parties and groups, the African-centered nature and purpose of the party should be clearly and universally recognized. All right. Well, yeah, that's a lot of potential benefits of said party, and then it's parallels a little bit what he talked about when he was talking about the financial economic national kind of platform. Who's it called? Let me find it. Yeah, like a national. Yeah, so on page 49, he talked about an African American national political and economic system, and he had this idea of a national political, the president of the council, organizing council of presidents, then the national executive thing, then this, then that. But sorry, there was something else that was like an economic one. Anyway, clearly his you could see what Baba Amos Wilson was all about. He was about infrastructure building, institution building. It was all about, translating all of these lofty ideas into something that could actually have a benefit for us, for Africans in the US. So looking at some of the comments here. So Lao Tzu, sorry, earlier you said that, you said Eliwana Dr. Cornel West, the alternative in the USA. Yeah, well, there you go. I haven't been following him too closely, but I have seen that pop up. Then you said number 13 is so important. Number 13 was, what was number 13? Maintain an independent, highly informative, ethnically committed media center. Yeah, that's kind of the space that we're in, isn't it? We're in this kind of space of media, dissemination. And then Brother Oni said, that's an important caveat. Our Black political party was sabotaged by a Black Democrat. Okay, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and I'm sure Baba Amos was speaking from personal experience there as well. And I quite like that point as well about the religious thing, because, the moralizing and the moralistic thing like this, because that will be a big thing. Get us all together. Someone wants to talk about what God is, who God is. Someone else wants to talk about, well, we shouldn't be eating these foods because the Quran this, and then other one wants to say no sex outside marriage, and then the other one wants to say, even sexuality. Let's just be real. Even that topic, like, I think we're going to have to work out, in wherever we are domiciled in the world, we're going to have to work out a way that we can cooperate, even while we have disagreement on some of these key things. We have to maximize on those essential things, while being able to disagree with each other on some of these other matters. So yeah, thank you, Lao Tzu. Said another great reading program, Eli Wananda. I appreciate your time and passion that you bring to the reading. Thank you, and I appreciate you. I love you guys all for your input and for joining me, and for your motivation, encouragement, and support as well for Shizzle. And then yeah, Baba Amos also was a Garveyite, a student and adherent of the teachings of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who also influenced Baba Kwame, or Sajefo Kwame Nkrumah, who also influenced and was a huge figure in the liberation struggles throughout the continent of Africa. So there we go. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Asante Nisana, it's been a pleasure. It's been a really good one again this week. Look out for the future stream, hopefully next week, but we'll see how things go. But yeah, have a blessed time. I want to encourage you guys as well, if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Do like this video, do share the video, and if you haven't already checked out the website, mindfulblackdad.com, then do go to mindfulblackdad.com and share that with your friends and networks as well. The site is quite small at the moment. There's not that much stuff on the site at the moment, but it's going to expand, it's going to grow, it's going to develop over time. So asante sana, much love to you, Paul Morris. Peace and blessings to each and every single one of you. Have a lovely rest of the afternoon, evening, night, and I'll see you next time. All right, take care, peace and blessings. Salama kwaherini.